My therapist recently asked me what my 5-year plan was. And the problem is, I don't even have a 2-year plan. Which is kind of crazy because my 16-year-old self had her entire life mapped out all on a timeline. By 18 to 21, find my husband. 22, move out. By 25, be married and start having kids by 25 to 30 years old. Just to name a few, which is literally insane. Before we get started, this isn't a life advice video. This is just a conversation about what it actually feels like to be in your 20s. Pressures, the experiences, and everything in between that comes in like your early 20s at least. Because if this was a life advice video, we'd be in trouble. Because I don't know what I'm doing. I am just beginning my 20s. So this would be terrible. It'd be like the blind leading the blind. You know what I'm saying? Finding those journals honestly did something to me. I wouldn't necessarily call it like a wake-up call. But it definitely brought up the feeling that I may be running out of time. Don't get me wrong, the feeling was always kind of there, but it kind of just like... I'm turning 21 in 2 months, and I haven't done any of the things on that list. And not only that, I don't even know if those are the things that I necessarily want or even prioritize right now in this moment of my life. And I think that's where I feel the most lost, trying to figure out who I am versus who I thought I was supposed to become. Because right now, I genuinely have no idea. And I know I'm not the only one because conveniently enough, I have access to the internet. I have access to TikTok, and on there, wonderful platform, I have had videos pop up on my feed of people around my age experiencing the same thing that I have been, which is, why do we feel like we're running out of time when we've barely just begun? I've recently quit one of my jobs for several different reasons, but one of them feeling that it just didn't feel right for me to stay. And I was fortunate enough to be in the situation where I could leave. But that decision led me to another question, which, what does feel right? How am I supposed to know if a job, a career, or a path is meant for me? I definitely do think that it's strange that by a certain age we're supposed to, or expected to, have everything figured out, especially when it comes to our careers. The moment we were kids, people would ask us what we wanted to be, and at kindergarten graduation, it's fun and light and playful. And suddenly high school comes around and it's such a serious question that you must know the answer to. We're expected to choose a path, pick a program, and start building a future for yourself as if most 16 to 18-year-olds know what they're fucking doing or who they want to become. And I'm sure some people do. That's great. That's awesome for you. But I think most of us maybe don't. At least I didn't. I had hobbies that I thought I could turn into a career. I followed that path because it was what seemed logical to do at the time, but deep down something never really stuck. So I went to college, got a somewhat pointless certificate, graduated, then found myself right back where I started. I moved back home. I went back to a minimum wage part-time customer service paying job, and suddenly I felt like I'd gone backwards. Not only did I feel like I was back at square one, but I felt like I failed myself. Like everyone was moving forward while I was somehow stuck and stagnant. I noticed a feeling of shame whenever I'd see my old classmates or people that I used to know pop in the store that I work at. And I don't think that it's necessarily the store itself or the job itself. I think it's more what having a certain job means for somebody at a certain age, especially in my 20s. After going to college and all this shit, now they see me here. And I feel like it wouldn't be as, like, shameful. I wouldn't feel as heavy about it if I had something that I was, like, actively so sure about pursuing, and, like, I was so sure this is meant for me. Like, this is what I want to do. And, like, but because I didn't really have that path or that reassurance within myself even, it just made it so much worse. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know who I wanted to become. And that kind of forced me to look very much inwards. I mean, I'm an overthinker. I always think inwards. I'm quite a self-reflective person, but it made me really take a step back and be like, okay, quit fucking playing games and like actually think about it. Back in high school, we all worked jobs like this. It was normal. It was a way to get money. But now it feels different because everyone has now like a direction, it feels like, and maybe they don't have their whole life figured out, but at least they look like they're heading somewhere. If I didn't know where I was going, then I guess the better question was, who was I trying to become in the first place? You can get back to those journals that I found, and also I found some videos of myself on my old laptop about me talking to a camera and acting as if I'm like this famous YouTuber, whatever you want to call it. I realized that gave me more than just nostalgia. It gave me insight on who I was. Part of myself I've forgotten. Part of my life I had forgotten, how I viewed things, how I reacted, things I cared about. And while I was looking through those videos, I remembered something my mom used to tell me or ask me, which I'm sure we can all relate to, which is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And normally some people would be like, oh, I want to be a firefighter, a scientist, a rocket scientist. I want to be an author. I want to be a news broadcaster. I want to forecast the fucking weather. Build houses. I want to be a popo. I want to be a florist. They would have a career in mind. My response was, I just want to be happy. And every time I'd say that, she'd get a little confused and kind of offended. She'd be like, what do you mean happy? Like, are you not happy now? And I remember just shrugging my shoulders and be like, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if I fully understood what happiness meant for me back then. I don't even know if I understand it necessarily now. Because happiness that I wanted at 10 years old is probably vastly different from the happiness that I want as 20-year-old. Everybody was focused on becoming something. I was so focused on feeling something. I've never had a strong vision of who I wanted to become. Maybe like Claudine Wolfe, if you had asked me. No, but seriously, I didn't have some dream identity in mind. I wasn't imagining a specific career, lifestyle, or version of myself. At least not one that I deemed achievable. I just wanted to be happy. And maybe that's why I've spent so much of my life making decisions based off of like my feeling. Because if happiness is still the goal, I have to ask myself, what does happiness mean for me? What actually brings me joy? What kind of life feels meaningful for me? Who do I want to become? And are the things that I'm doing today helping me towards that? I recently heard somebody say on the internet, of course, that if you don't know who you want to be, you should always look back at your child self and see what they wanted to be when they were growing up, and that's how you feel more fulfilled in life. And I don't know if that's entirely true, because I don't know, but I do think that there's some value in looking at who you wanted to become before the world started telling you who you should become. Maybe the answer isn't hidden in some 5-year plan. Maybe it's hidden in the parts of ourselves that we've forgotten, or maybe not. I don't know. I ain't a fucking wise philosopher who knows everything, but also who truly knows. Maybe some people do. Maybe some people think that they do. Maybe some people thought that they did, and now they're back here. I think we're all just kind of trying to figure it out as we go. And I think it becomes harder to figure out who you are and what you want to become when there's a timeline involved. The more I questioned who I wanted to become, the more I questioned the timeline I had for relationships as well. Going back to those journals, one thing stood out more than anything else was that 16-year-old Sydney thought that she'd find her husband by now. Not only has that not happened, I'm not even sure if that's what I'm necessarily prioritizing in this moment. Though everyone and their mother seems to be so concerned about my love life, it just honestly makes me question whether I should be worried. Am I doing the right things by not making relationships my main priority right now? Am I missing something? Am I somehow doing life wrong because I'm not doing it by the book? I can only speak from my own experience, of course, but I definitely have felt the pressure to experience certain things by a certain time, or a certain age. The pressure to have your first relationship, the pressure to date, the pressure to have stories and experiences before, during, and after college, or before you hit this imaginary milestone. Because if you don't, it can feel like you're falling behind, or like you're an outcast, or you're, again, somehow doing something wrong. My therapist once told me something, though, that kind of stuck out to me, because not only is it interesting, but it's also, she told me this like a million times because apparently I can't get through my fucking sick skull. She told me that when we are younger, when our frontal lobe is developing, of course, the frontal lobe is in charge of many different things, but one of the things that they're in charge of is our need for outward validation. Fucking 4 more years of this shit. Honestly, it does explain a lot, because I think so much of our 20s is spent looking around and asking, like, am I okay? Like, am I doing okay? Like, are you feeling this too? Or is it just me? And if it's just me, what the fuck? Am I where I'm supposed to be? Am I moving in a direction that is right? Do you think that my career choices are good? Am I normal? We want validation for our careers. We want validation for relationships. We want the reassurance that we're on the right path. I think it's difficult to discover who you are when a part of you is constantly trying to prove yourself to other people. Maybe that's why so many of us hesitate to take risks. Maybe that's why we stay in situations that don't feel right. Maybe that's why we hold ourselves to a certain timeline that we never really consciously choose. For me, relationships became kind of one of those things. Finding my person started to feel genuinely less of a thing that I necessarily wanted, and more of a thing or something that I felt like I had to accomplish by a certain time. Not just because I had created a timeline for myself, but because the world kind of created a timeline for me as well. Don't get me wrong, I crave to be loved, but I crave loving myself more. And that doesn't just apply to romantic relationships with the timelines, it also applies to friendships as well. Once I graduated high school, a lot of my friends kind of faded away. The same thing happened after college. Part of it is because I didn't really have many friends to begin with, and part of it is because life gets busy, and part of it is because sometimes people just grow apart. My life takes me one way, yours takes you another. Whoopsie daisy. Are you okay? And that's okay. At least I think it is. I'd be lying if it wasn't isolating or like lonely. Oh, sometimes. I think because of that, I've also kind of made myself a hermit. I mean, I definitely became introverted after COVID, which we'll get into. I found making friends after school was way harder than anyone kind of prepares you for. When you're in school, you're surrounded by people your age all the time. Once that's gone, finding genuine connections becomes something that you have to actively seek out. And even when you do actively seek them out, like, it's still not easy. Especially when you're looking for more than people to hang out with. You're looking for like a genuine connections and like a soul family, personally. I want the kind of friendships that I don't have to constantly second guess myself. I want the kind of friendships that I could just be myself and not have to worry, oh, did this thing come off the wrong way? People who completely understand me instead of obviously misunderstanding me. Growing up with the internet made me romanticize that idea even more. Like shows, movies, books, social media, they all make it seem like finding your people is like eventually will happen, or especially by a certain age. As an avid romance reader, okay, I've noticed every main character somehow has an incredible support system. Friendship that feels effortless, the friends that become family. I've always wanted that. Not because I want dozens of friends, but because I want meaningful ones. I trust people who genuinely know me, people who make life a little less lonely and so much easier and happier. 16, I definitely thought that my life would be full of that in my 20s. An amazing friend group, a strong sense of belonging, a great connection, an adventure. By far, so far, not my reality. Not only do I feel uncertain about my career, not only do I feel uncertain about where my life is heading, but I also feel uncertain about my relationships and my friendships. And if I'll even find those people. Maybe that's an expectation that I have to let go of. It's just like careers and relationships, meaningful friendships don't necessarily come on the preferred timeline. The reality of adulthood is a lot different than what I imagined it would be as a kid. Actually, if I'm being honest, it's a lot harder. When I was younger, I couldn't wait to grow up. I'm sure many of you can relate. I think when I was younger, being older meant freedom. Being older meant independence. Being able to do whatever I wanted. Nobody talks about the fact that growing up also means responsibility. Bills. Stress. Uncertainty. Realizing that nobody really knows what the fuck they're doing. I think a part of why adulthood feels so difficult is because I feel like it doesn't feel as alive as I imagined it would be. Kids, we spend years looking forward to freedom, being able to eat whatever you want for dinner. We became adults and realized that most of our time working was just to afford the basics. Working to afford food, working to afford rent, working to afford the occasional day off if you're lucky. And when that day off eventually comes, we're often too exhausted to enjoy it. It's strange because life was supposed to start when we became adults. Then COVID happened, at least for me, it hit when I was in grade 9. And I don't know if it's because those years were so fundamental or formative, I should say. But something after COVID, life just hasn't felt the same. It's almost like time sped up. It's crazy, though. Can we talk about that? Like, it's crazy that it's been 6 years since COVID. What the fuck? Anyways, everyone was expected to move on with life after everything that went down. The whole couple of years, COVID and everything else, like this and like that whole time period was insane. Now we're being told to build careers, buy homes, and build a future for ourselves that feels increasingly more expensive and uncertain and difficult and nearly impossible to achieve. Graduate, we go to college or university or whatever. Many of us graduate post-secondary school into a job market that looks nothing like we expected, nor were we necessarily promised. Housing feels out of reach. The cost of living is astronomically high. The future just feels so much harder to picture. And I think that's why a lot of us feel disappointed and angry. Not because adulthood looks necessarily bad, but because it looks nothing like we were promised. If I imagine at 16, I don't know if that even exists for me yet. That's one of the hardest things that I have to let go of and accept. Kid, I thought adults had everything figured out, and maybe that's kudos to the adults for looking like their shit was put together, and maybe it was because the life that we're living as 20-year-olds is vastly different from the life that they were living at 20. And now that I'm becoming one, I've realized that most of us are just trying to make the best decisions based off of the resources and the information that we have. And I think a lot of disappointment comes from the reality versus the expectation, the gap between those two. Expectation I had for myself, the expectation the world had for me, my family had for me, my peers, get good grades, pick a good career, find your person, build a life, be successful, be happy, and preferably do it all on a schedule. But life doesn't seem to work that way. At least mine didn't. Or hasn't, I should say. The older I get, the more I realize that life is far less predictable than I thought it would be. That's what's so difficult to accept. Not that my life is so difficult to imagine, but more of there was never a guarantee that my life would look a certain way. I think the reason why we feel like we're running out of time is because we're not really being able to actually live it, to be present, to feel alive. I think 16-year-old me genuinely thought and believed that life in your 20s would be the most alive you'd ever feel. And to be honest, your 20s, well, at least now that I'm actually here in my early 20s, it doesn't feel like that at all. At least not yet. I'm only 21, so I've had very little experience for what it's like being in my 20s. But I think in a way I'm grieving the expectations I've had for what my 20s could look like. And I'm not saying that those days will never come. Sure they will. Maybe. I think they just might not look the way that I imagined it would be. To be completely honest, I feel like your 20s is an absolute shit show of a decade. I think it's the decade where you're forced to discover who you are and what you want to do and who you want to become, who you want around, what kind of life you're trying to build, etc. People always say that your 30s are the best, which, again, I don't know, I'm 21, so. But I do think that your early 20s are the decade where you're learning how to be an adult for the first time without direction. You're trying to navigate careers, relationships, friendships, finances, and your future, all while trying to figure out who you are. That's a lot. And I don't think it's easy, but I do think that I think it's worth it. At least I hope it is. And after all of this, I still don't have a 5-year plan. So my therapist is going to be so happy with me. I also think that maybe I was never supposed to. At least not as strict as I was in the past. Maybe a direction, sure, but not a specific timeline. And a lot can happen in 5 years, so I feel like you never know. Maybe my 20s aren't about having everything figured out. And maybe they're about figuring it out as I go. Maybe that's just life. I think the biggest takeaway for me is realizing that no matter what age you are, you're never going to have everything figured out. Life keeps happening whether you want it to or not, whether you're ready for it or not. Every new chapter comes new challenges, new lessons, and new things that you have to figure it out as you go. 30, you might be figuring out marriage or the finances with buying a new home and the responsibilities that come with buying a new home, or parenthood, which I don't think anyone will truly ever figure out. At 50 or 60, you might be figuring out retirement plans. It could also be health related. Getting older means new health issues or new health things that are brought up that you didn't know and you have to figure out now. And learning how to navigate other seasons of your life. There will always be something new to figure out. So instead of chasing certainty, I'm learning to try to embrace life regardless of the unsettling feeling of the uncertainty. Because maybe the goal was never really to have all of the answers, but maybe just to have enough faith and trust within myself that whatever comes next, I can handle it and I will figure it out in my life. Which, who fucking knows what that could be? I don't know. Nobody ever knows. I don't like not knowing, though. That's the issue. So I actually have to figure out maybe like a 5-year plan. But also, like, you can't control shit. I hate that. I don't like not being able to control shit. I can't control how this is going to perform. I can't control any fucking thing except for myself. But I can't control, like, the things that aren't in my control. What the fuck? Wait to edit this and be like, wow, I have to repeat myself a million times because my script, my essay that I wrote, I want it to be good and I'm, like, too stressed. Fuck's sake. Fuck, bro. Why do I keep looking over? It's pissing me off. Maybe that's why so many of us hesitate to taste. Maybe that's so many. Guys, this isn't funny anymore. And I think of that because. And I think of. What the fuck is it? And I think because of that. So I have one more year left. Because once I hit 22 and I still haven't found my husband, we're fucked. Shawty's wrong. I don't know. You're so cute.